All right, Dior just launched Sauvage Extrait, and once I add my sales tax to this, I'm paying more than $4.47 per mil for this. That's dramatically more expensive than all of the rest of the Sauvage flankers. And also, get this, also way more than Bleu de Chanel L'Exclusive that just came out last year. What do you guys think of Sauvage Extrait? Is it worth the money? Let's find out. So yeah, Sauvage Extrait just came out and I've been testing it out and I'm going to tell you all about this. This is the second Sauvage flanker created by Francis Kurkdjian. He also did Eau Forte, I think a couple of years ago. I'm completely forgetting when that came out. I think it's been 2 years though. And the rest of the collection was done by Francois de Mache, the previous in-house perfumer. So this is Extrait de Parfum concentration, 50 ml for $205. It is for men. It's targeted to men. No problem for a woman to enjoy a fragrance like this and wear it. It features notes of bergamot, opulent French lavender, leathery Vietnamese oud, velvety Virginia cedarwood, Indonesian patchouli, and vetiver. So when I first started testing this out, it instantly shocked me by how animalic it was. But since I've been wearing quite a bit of it just to see and experience this fragrance, it started blending much more and my nose adjusted to mostly what the Sauvage DNA is all about. I do have to say, this is quite intense. It's also quite long-lasting, which gets a lot of points for what it is. It outperformed the Elixir, which I was quite shocked about. But also, first experiences were quite potent with the oud, and later on, as I said, my nose adjusted. It acts more like Sauvage than when I first started testing it, when the oud and the leathery experience from the oud was front and center. So the more I wore it, the more I started experiencing Sauvage, but first impressions were more oud-like. So is that going to turn off some people who experience this fragrance? But for me, it is, even though it started smelling like what the Sauvage DNA is, it definitely stands out as an oudier or leatherier take on the original. So it has these smoky touches. It's quite woody and it has a little bit of a blast of some citruses and also some ambroxany type notes that are previously featured in the fragrance. And then it gets darker and more intense and woods develop further. And then of course, leathery touches appear as well. So it acts more animalic, smoky, and super intense, and it completely outperforms the Elixir, which the Elixir happens to be my favorite in the collection. I absolutely love it. But when I wake up the next day, I can still smell Sauvage Extrait, but the Elixir is completely gone. That is the disappointing part about the comparison between the Extrait and the Elixir. They did a great job with the Extrait. They added a lot of intensity, and I'm not 100% sure if this is truly authentic Vietnamese oud. The consumer that wears the Sauvage fragrances appreciate oud, so I'm asking this question because most people that wear Sauvage, I think, want something simplistic to wear and nothing complicated, and I feel like first impressions were a bit judgmental. I think a lot of people are going to have that judgmental first impression as well with this because the oud is pretty strong at first and it does overpower and people might get, caught off guard with how animalic it smells. I've gotten adjusted to it, as I said. I am enjoying this fragrance, but Sauvage fragrance collection is not one of my favorite fragrance collections. Is it your favorite fragrance collection? I mean, I enjoy it as a kind of a dumb reach fragrance, but they are charging a lot of money here for this now. And are people going to dig it? Let's quickly smell it. And we'll talk about the rest of the fragrances next. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about Bleu de Chanel L'Exclusive, which, as I said, is less expensive than Dior Sauvage, because when you make the Extrait into 100 ml, you're paying $410, which compared to the $270 some for the Bleu de Chanel Exclusive, it's much more expensive. But here with this, to me, it reminds me a lot of the Elixir, but with the addition of the leathery, oudy, animalic notes. Because it's rich, it's quite rich. And I always felt like the Elixir was also very rich, super amber forward, but really pulpy and heavy, dense notes and experiences. And I really, for me, my favorite in the bunch happened to be the Elixir, because I just felt like they took the original Sauvage into a more luxurious direction. But still, the collection for me is not one of my all-time favorite collections, but if I had to pick, it would always be the Elixir. I'm a little torn right now which version I would go with, and we'll get to that in a little bit as well. But as far as smells go, as I said earlier on, there's some citruses, and I do get a slight bit of touch of something like the original Sauvage. It has a little bit of like ambroxan, musky notes, something that reminds me of the original Sauvage. And then it starts getting really, super intense, and the lavender appears, but initial blast of oud is right there front and center, and it might catch you off guard and come off of a very animalic. But I mean, I've worn so much of this now, I'm enjoying it, and I feel like it's competing with the Elixir, which kind of happens, but it is quite more expensive compared to the Elixir. So then where does the Sauvage Extrait fit in the Sauvage family? We've got an EDT, an EDP, a Parfum, the Eau Forte, which I felt like was completely unnecessary. Of course, the Elixir as well. But I'm thinking the darkest, most powerful is the Extrait, because that's what it is. The oud and the leathery touches and the animalic touches makes this the darkest experience. Plus, I think it's the most powerful. I was shocked how much of the longevity is much better than the Elixir, which I always felt like the Elixir was the most powerful in the entire collection. So I feel like the Eau Forte is the most unconventional and the most different of all of the fragrances. In fact, it's my least favorite, completely, hands down, totally unnecessary. And the herbal smell in there, I cannot stand. It almost smells like herb spices for cooking rather than something I would wear for a fragrance. So that kind of turns me off. The richest, I feel like, happens to be the Elixir. It's definitely the most luxurious to me and the richest. Because when you're comparing it to the Extrait is quite dark and animalic. So it doesn't give me super luxurious quality to it when I have this like super decadent take on the original Sauvage. The Elixir I find to be super luxurious and the richest. Now, with the Parfum, I think it's the smoothest and the most refined. And it's interesting how when the original came out, then the Eau de Parfum, and then the Parfum, and I felt like, wow, they're stopping at the Parfum, but they continued for sure. And they kept giving us more and more versions. But for me, I feel like it's one of the smoothest and most refined. But I can also add the Elixir to that mix as well. I feel like the Elixir is also super smooth and refined, but because it's also very heavy, I feel like it kind of takes away from the refinement and the smoothness of the Eau de Parfum. And then we've got the Eau de Parfum, and I feel like this is the most versatile and the best all-rounder for me. That's what I feel like, because the original has overdose of ambroxan, and by the time we got to the Parfum, it was smooth and refined, but here it became more versatile, a bit easier, but also a bit longer lasting from the original as well. But then we've got the original, which I feel like is the most energetic and it's the freshest. And then also I feel like it's the least expensive of the bunch. I think that the original does have great projection, but when you're wearing it and comparing it to the rest of the collection, it's the thinnest. But for me, it has really, really great projection, which makes the fragrance something great to wear and something that is a crowd pleaser. People tend to like it, especially once it blends with your own body chemistry. So those are what I think are the different ways the Elixir and most importantly, the Extrait fit with the Sauvage family. So now that we've gone through the entire Sauvage family, where does Bleu de Chanel Exclusive fit? So I complained about this fragrance when it first came out last year. I felt like it was super, super expensive for what they're giving us. A Bleu de Chanel this expensive, but now that Sauvage Extrait has come out, which is even more expensive than Chanel's Bleu de Chanel Exclusive, I feel like this is going to be not getting the criticism that the Dior Sauvage Elixir is getting. But for me, I complained about the price on this. Some people thought I was complaining about the smell. I feel like the smell was pretty good. In fact, I think it's fresh mixed in with kind of smoky, ambery notes. Does it work to you guys? Do you wear it? I mean, I think it's pretty solid, and I like ambers to begin with. I just felt like it was too pricey, and also maybe the idea of a freshie going into an ambery direction, keeping the original DNA. But this is $275 for 100 ml. This is Bleu de Chanel exclusive. Dior Sauvage Extrait is $410 if it came in a 100 ml bottle, but it only comes in a 50 ml bottle. So it makes the fragrance much more expensive than the $275 price tag for the Bleu de Chanel exclusive. Is Sauvage Extrait much more expensive because of the oud? What do you guys think? Is that what it is, the price? So the comparison is totally killer. I feel like $410 for the extrait of this is way, way too pricey. Will they come up with 100 ml? Then I think maybe it'll be priced lower. But for now, it only comes in 50 ml. So we're going to price the 100 ml at $410. That's why it is much more expensive. So for me, both of them I feel like are overpriced, but the Dior Sauvage Extrait is super overpriced to begin with. It's $135 more for this in comparison to the L'Exclusive, the Bleu de Chanel L'Exclusive. So I'm going to give you a quick ranking of the entire collection. I feel like the best overall Sauvage, at least for me, is Elixir, but the Extrait is coming so close behind, and the fact that it's so powerful, it's competing with the Elixir. In fact, there were times that I was layering the Extrait with the Elixir, and it was pretty nuclear, but the Extrait on its own is super, super intense. That is what is giving it points. But for me, if I had to pick my favorite Sauvage, it's still the Elixir, but followed by the Extrait. And the negative points it gets because of the price. It's too expensive. Too damn expensive is what I should say. I think the best value would be the original Eau de Toilette. That comes at $1.55 per mil after tax. That's before the discounters. This is suggested retail price. This is if you buy this directly from the Dior website or a department store that doesn't have any promotions. So it's substantially cheaper than the Extrait, but it is also the Eau de Toilette. It's the original. It's lighter. It's thinner. But for me, it also has great projection. This is, I think, out of all, this is probably the best projection, but you can experience how thin it is when you compare it to the Elixir and the Extrait. The best performer is the Extrait. I mean, hands down, as I keep saying, it's the best performer, and because it just lasts and lasts and lasts. It's a very long-lasting fragrance, but also it's quite darker than the original. Even the Elixir, I felt like, was gone into a darker direction compared to the rest of the collection. But for me, it has that smoothness, which I find to be much brighter than how dark the Extrait is, which, you know, if you compare the two, you can totally get. But what about the best first Sauvage? If you've never tried Sauvage before, I would start with the Eau de Parfum. I think the EDP is a slight bit more luxurious than the Eau de Toilette, which makes it a great entry point. But still, I feel like if you're kind of on a budget, you want to experience every single one of them, you can start with the original, the Eau de Toilette. But for me, the best first Sauvage is the Eau de Parfum. It has a little bit of the Eau de Toilette, and also the fact that it's a little bit more luxurious than the Eau de Toilette, I find that to be the best one to start with. And the fact that it's only $1.89 per mil compared to how much the per mil price is of the Extrait, it is a little bit more than the Eau de Toilette, but it's still under $2 per mil. I think that's a great one to start with. So the best Sauvage for someone who already owns another Sauvage, I would say the Extrait. Give it a try. It is super intense because it is super new. So if you happen to have a Sauvage already, perhaps you have the Elixir, you have the Parfum or the Eau de Parfum, but give the Extrait a try. But it's definitely much more expensive and also more animalic. And if money was not an object, it's between the Elixir or the Extrait. And as I told you, my favorite is the Elixir, followed close behind by the Extrait. And the Extrait gets the negative points because it is so super expensive. So I am happy with the Elixir. And right now, you can find all of these Sauvages except for the Extrait at the discounters. It's even better. And the prices I'm quoting you and the per mil prices that I've been quoting you are also suggested retail prices. So wait for the Extrait to end up at the discounters. Maybe it will. Who knows? Will it? Okay, now it's time to do a side-by-side comparison of Dior Sauvage Extrait with Bleu de Chanel L'Exclusive by Chanel. Which one do you think I'm going to prefer? Let me know. Add a comment below, but let's go ahead and spray. 3 sprays of each. So I've been mentioning that the Dior is a lot more potent than the Chanel. I enjoy the Chanel quite a bit, and I like ambery fragrances, and that's the direction Chanel took the latest Bleu de Chanel. But when I was comparing them side by side, the Bleu de Chanel was coming off quite wimpy for me. It was just chugging along very slowly, where the Dior is just way overpowering. Intense, super strong, darker, but still fresh, super beefy, dense, and very, very long lasting. I got much better performance from the Dior compared to the Chanel. And even though I thought the Chanel gave me great performance on its own, I think it's the strongest one in its own collection, I felt like the Dior completely beat it out, because I don't know what Francis has done to this fragrance. It's a very nuclear take on the Sauvage series of fragrances. It's super, super intense. So there is that. So does that justify the price that Dior is charging or asking for the Extrait? What do you guys think? I think it's way too expensive to begin with. I'm hoping that, just like the Elixir, when it first came out, I believe they only had a 50 ml. Later, they added the 100, and I think it also has 150 ml right now. I think that's what they'll do with the Extrait. I feel like the fragrance itself is going to be very, very popular, and they'll probably end up doing that, adding additional sizes. But for now, I think it's way too expensive. And generally, for me, I much prefer to buy a 100 ml bottle versus a 50, because you get a better deal when you do that. But since Dior only launched a 50 ml, I would use caution right now. Try and get a sample it in store to see if you like it. You might think it's one of the best things you've smelled, and then it would totally justify the price. But for me, performance is just out of this world. For a designer, this is one of the strongest fragrances, but also it comes with a very hefty price tag, so you have to use caution. But let's quickly smell. I like both of the smells. I kind of prefer amber more than oud, obviously, but I've gotten so used to wearing the Dior. And when you do the side by side, the Chanel has a softness about it. The Dior is like this, like explosive smelling. Even though I think they're using the citruses, the aromatic notes of lavender, then you've got the oud, along with the patchouli and the additional woodsy notes. I think there's vetiver in here as well, from what I remember. I'm forgetting. I think it just comes off more explosive. But there's something softer and more elegant about the Chanel, but I think that's kind of how the fragrances are created. But I would pick, if I could afford the Sauvage, I would go with the Sauvage. But if it's too expensive, fall back on the Elixir. I think the Elixir is the best overall. Best value with the Sauvage Eau de Toilette. Best performer, of course, is the Extrait. It's just nuclear. It's the strongest men's fragrance that I've experienced right now in the market. So men's signature collection fragrance, I should say. Although there's a few from Tom Ford that are strong, and also probably from Jean-Paul Gaultier. But right now, this is just very, very strong. Best for Sauvage, go with the Sauvage Eau de Parfum. Best for someone who already owns Sauvage, go with the Extrait or the Elixir. And between Sauvage Extrait and Bleu de Chanel, I'm going to say Sauvage Extrait. But Elixir still wins for me. It's the best one. So let me know your thoughts on these fragrances, the comparison, and Sauvage Extrait in general. Are you curious to find out about it? Are you excited for this release? Are you not a fan of Sauvage? You're going to skip it out, or maybe you like oud and you're going to see what this one's all about. I have to be honest, going back to the oud seems a bit synthetic. I'm not 100% sold on this oud. That's the negative part about the fragrance. The oud seems a bit synthetic and not so luxurious, because I've experienced so many oud fragrances. This one comes off a bit cheap, but overall the fragrance itself is super potent. which I've mentioned so many times here. But let me know your thoughts on this. Are you going to rush out and sample it, or are you going to skip this one out? Do add a comment. And if you already have all, which is your favorite? Which one do you enjoy? Are you a fan of the Elixir as much as I am? Or if you've experienced how potent this extrait is, let me know what that experience is like. Add a comment below. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please let me know your thoughts on the fragrance, interact with this video, like it, share it, add your comment as I've been mentioning, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Click the bell icon so that you'll be notified for future videos. Thanks so much. See you later. Bye-bye.